Good evening. I'm going to get the fire evacuation thing started just a minute ahead of time, but this is Resident Services Committee. You're all very welcome. Please bear with me as the new chair in case I do make a mistake. I'm sure these lovely officers will poke me if I do. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The exit is located to the rear of the room. Exit through reception unless otherwise instructed. Meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Can I remind members and officers that in order to be heard clearly within the room by those present and on the webcast, please speak directly into your microphones. And also, could you please make sure your phones are off or turned to silent? Okay. And it now being precisely 6:30, we will get started. So, first on the agenda, do I see a full committee? No apologies or substitutions? Fantastic. Declarations of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? No? Wonderful. Okay, item 3, appointment of a vice chair. Do we have any nominations? Councillor Conquest?
I nominate Councillor Slimming.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Slimming? Thank you. Are there any other nominations?
I'd like to nominate Councillor Aaron Munalemi.
And do we have a seconder for Councillor Mamalanene? Thank you. Okay. So, show of hands. Okay, so if you would like Councillor Slimming to be vice chair, please raise your hand now. Thank you. And if you would like to vote for Councillor Mamalanene, please raise your hands now. Thank you. So, Councillor Slimming has duly been elected as our vice chair for this year. Thank you very much. Okay, and moving on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of March. Do we have any, has anyone got any queries or issues with the minutes, or are we happy to record that they are a true record? Thank you very much. We'll sign those in a minute. Okay, so and now on to the new food waste collection service. So, let's see, this report provides an update that I will pass over to Councillor Laura James to introduce the item as our Cabinet Member.
Thank you. Really pleased to bring this paper to you with an update. I think that we will be able to demonstrate that through tonight's presentation and how we talk to you about this. But it's been exceptional, the rollout, and there was so much work that went into this to actually achieve this in relation to just the initial organisation of the purchasing of and the budgets and things around this, but then actually delivering the caddies and making it work and working with Serco. And really, it has been exceptional how that has worked. And also the take-up from residents. I'm delighted with the number of people that are actually using the service. And we'll be able to talk to you tonight about where do we go from here now in relation to encouraging more people to use it, and the piece of work that's been done to identify, some initial understanding of who isn't using it and how we can start to develop that further and how that then fits into the wider waste strategy. But really just to say a massive thank you to the officers and the work that they did to make this possible. I'm very happy later on to take questions.
Thank you, Councillor James. And over to Helen Taylor-Cobb to provide us with some background on this report.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening. So for those who don't know me, my name is Helen Taylor-Cobb, and I'm Head of Contracted Services. With me this evening is Ian Spicer, and Maria Massarella. And we've got a few slides where we're pulling out key points from the report that we have previously provided. So thank you for providing us with the opportunity to come and update you on the food waste service that's now been running for 8 months. As indicated by Councillor James, the launch of the service has been very successful, and we're quite pleased with how it is performing so far. So we've prepared a very brief presentation just summarising some of the key points from the new food waste service report, which we hope will assist with this evening's conversations. We cover the areas of procurement and the implementation of the service, the performance and impact on recycling, as well as some of our planned next steps. So I'm going to hand over to Maria just to pick up and carry on.
Thanks, Helen. While I get the presentation to come to life. There we go. First up, I'll give you a brief service overview. I'm sure lots of you around this table have probably been to one of the all-member briefings. You'll have been party to some of the conversations around the implementation plans and the progress that we made in the run-up to going live on the 6th of October. But for those of you who weren't or need a refresher, the service went live on the 6th of October 2025. The food waste collection service offers a collection to all of our residents, whether you're in a household or a flat or any kind of development, and that's just over 80,000 properties that we've now got in the borough. We had quite a competitive, I suppose, procurement process in that when government mandated that all local authorities needed to offer a food waste service, we then entered into a bit of a bum fight around getting hold of vehicles, getting hold of caddies. If you can imagine, for our service across Hart and Basingstoke, we needed in the region of 130,000 indoor caddies. The same for outdoor, we needed 15 food waste vehicles, and these things can be quite hard to get hold of. So we chose to make our live date 6 months ahead of schedule in order for us to kind of get ahead of the procurement race. And that was really successful, actually. And it also saved us a fair bit of money because a lot of the prices for the commodities went up in the January. But by that point, our service was live, and we had procured everything that we needed. Quite a number of councils actually fell behind the deadline because they got caught up in that procurement issue and they couldn't get vehicles in time. Some manufacturers stopped taking orders if lead times were over 2 years. So that part of the project was really successful, and we're really pleased with, the choices that we made and the process that we took. So in terms of deliveries and things like that, we were really lucky, actually, because with a conversation with property services and a bit of toing and froing, we secured a unit within Basingstoke that then became our delivery hub. So we've had lots of support from other teams across the council, which is one of the things that made it so successful. So we're really grateful for that, actually. And then we have delivered, if you're interested in the numbers, over 72,000 outdoor caddies, over 83 indoor caddies, 825 communal bins, 83,000 rolls of liners, nearly 5,000 rolls of communal liners, and 83,000 leaflets. That's a lot of things to get to a lot of people. But it's been really well received. We're really happy with how well it's been received, actually, because previous to doing the collections, the sort of word on the street, if you like, was that if you offer a weekly collection of waste, your take-up is going to be really poor. And actually, Ian will go on to take up a bit later, but we've been really pleased, considering we've got a weekly waste collection during the launch period, at how well it's been taken up. So moving on to tonnages, I don't know how many of you are waste tonnage experts or how many of you enjoy that kind of information. But during our first month of collections, bearing in mind it wasn't a full month because we started on the 6th of October, we collected 313 tonnes of food waste. Now, as you'll see, our figures do jump around a little bit, but there is also a huge amount of consistency in terms of them sitting around the 350 mark, the mid 300s. Obviously, launch wasn't a full month, but it was a good take up. November, we saw the service start to bed in and our tonnages increase. December, there's always an increase in waste and recycling and all waste types across December and January. January obviously saw very high numbers, February slightly less, it's a short month. And then, yeah, we've continued to see a consistent amount of food waste being put out, which is really good to see. So far, we've sent more than 2,000 tonnes of food waste to the site in Herriard. It's a digester which produces energy, plus the digestate is then a fertiliser that gets piped onto local farmland from there. So it has two uses, and no kind of scrap is left unused, which is excellent. We've had no issues with that. The quality of our input has been really good. We haven't had any issues, from the site. So yeah, residents seem to be using the service really well, and yeah. Now, I know this looks like a lot of numbers, and it is a lot of numbers, but to focus ourselves on how well the service is doing, we sort of take a step back and look at it in comparison to the other tonnages that we're collecting. We could just look at the food waste in isolation, but what we want to see over the coming years, and we won't be able to see that yet, we're still only sort of 6 to 8 months in the data, but what we want to see in coming years is for our overall waste tonnages to start reducing. We want people to use their food waste bin as a way of understanding what they're wasting and how they can prevent it. So it's not always about collecting as much food as we possibly can. Obviously, we want our participation to be excellent, but actually in the long run, we want people to look in their food waste bin and think, I really don't need to waste a loaf of bread every week. I can do something about that, and sort of start to chip away at the amount of food waste that they collect. What we've done to sort of try and depict the overall waste picture is take some figures from 24-25 in terms of our total waste figures, which is the fourth line down, the line just above the green section, and then also do the same figures for the last 6 months of 25-26, which is when we had launched our food waste service. So if you look, the total amount on the grey line is 20,174 tonnes, and that's the total waste generated, including food waste, during the last 6 months of 25-26. Now, if you compare that to the cell below, which is 20,080 tonnes of waste, obviously this year we've generated a little bit more waste, just under 100 tonnes. However, over 2,000 of those tonnes is diverted food waste, which is excellent. You're looking at over sort of 20% of, that amount now being diverted. Sorry, not 20% at all, 10%. So that's really positive. And obviously, like I said previously, we want to see that number coming down. And then below, we sort of want to look at the impact on our recycling as well, because I think the more you bring food waste and those matters to the fronts of people's minds, they start looking at the other services they're using, the green bin, glass recycling, all of those things. So we've seen a slight increase of sort of 172 tonnes on the same period last year. Again, that's positive. The waste increase, I think, was 94 tonnes. So as long as we're producing more recycling than we were compared to the amount of waste we were producing, we're on to a good thing. So diversion is on the up. I think since the service started, we've collected now a total of 2,878 tonnes of food waste, which is incredible to think that waste last year was just being sent to the incinerator. It's really positive all round. So I'm going to finish talking and hand over to Ian.
Thank you. Just in terms of putting some figures into context, the borough over the course of a year roughly collects around 60,000 tonnes of all material. So to generate a 1% improvement is the equivalent of trying to move 600 tonnes from the waste bins into recycling. So as Maria's just explained, in the first 6 months, we've diverted over 2,000 tonnes, which is a great positive improvement in terms of where we are. To look at it in slightly more detail, if we look at quarters 3 and 4, which is October to March recently, we can see that there has been a large increase in the recycling rate of around 8% consistently over those 2 quarters, which has been primarily driven by food waste. Taking those 2 quarters into account when we look at a combined figure for the whole of the year, so we've got 6 months without food waste, 6 months with food waste, we're looking at a year-end outturn of around about a 3.6 improvement on the recycling rate. So when we compare that with the previous year of 24-25, again, we're moving in the right direction. So projecting that forward, although we've only got 6 months data and it's too early to plot a trend, the aim is that once we get into the 26-27 figures, we'll see that trend continue. So all positive in terms of recycling improvement. So in terms of resident participation and how well the service is going, so RAP are a government-funded organisation, and they provide guidance to the waste industry and local authorities in terms of waste collection and methodologies. So RAP have a recommended methodology for the collection of services and how they're analysed and how we compare them in terms of benchmarking. So using this nationally recognised approach, the waste team over a 3-week period went out and basically surveys over 1,000 properties each week, and that was over a 3-week period, so it's 3,000 plus properties in total in terms of in sampling. Participation rates varied across the borough, but on average across the borough the rate came out at 55%. So in terms of moving forward, we've got a second participation study planned for June, July this year, and the waste team are currently involved with Serco doing a targeted comms exercise for those participation areas that were low, so that we can see if different comm techniques are improving the services and we can increase participation over time. Thank you. So in terms of that, how we compare with other authorities, so as Maria mentioned earlier, different councils around the country have started this service at different times. Some of them are still yet to start. So looking at a bit of benchmarking in terms of councils that have done participation already, the participation does vary between those authorities that are collecting waste weekly and those collecting fortnightly. But as you can see from the table, the ones that have carried out the survey, those doing it fortnightly do generally have a higher percentage rate. If we look at Hart District in just a little bit more detail, they had the same deployment and communication plans as us. They deployed at the exact same time. They had their participation monitored at the exact same time using the exact same methodology, and they're coming out at 60.5%. So again, when we repeat the process later in the month, we'll be doing it for Basingstoke and Hart, so we can consistently compare the two. Also from the RAP methodology, they've carried out some studies on those councils that have measured participation, and on average those studies are showing that food waste combined with a weekly waste collection, on average participation is around 45 to 50%, and those authorities on a fortnightly collection, food participation is around 60 to 70%, which kind of mirrors what we're seeing locally and what we've seen with our neighbours. Addition to that, we're part of a food waste working group with the PI partnership project across Hampshire. So as all of the councils deploy food waste across the county, we're basically pooling all of our knowledge and information in terms of the services. So based on that tonnage collected, the participation rates, what we're seeing with crew training, communication, etc., we're sharing all that best practice, identifying issues, and then that will be incorporated into future communication plans and work with Serco.
Thank you. So looking then to summarise where we are currently, we've got quite consistent trending that's showing that on average we're getting around 364 tonnes of material each month. The missed bins and collection issues that you would expect to see at the start of any new deployment have come down considerably. So it's dropped from 142 missed per 100,000 to 43 missed bins per 100,000 in April of this year. So we're seeing a trending on that. The other thing I think that is important of this is that when you look at the scale of the collections, we've had over 1 million food waste collections between October to date, and we've had 12 food waste complaints in that time. So I think that in and of itself speaks to the service. I think one of the things that definitely helped as part of this process was the amount of support that we got from all of the ward councillors. So having ward councillors come back to us to say, we think there may be an issue here, we're not sure that people have got the message there, was really, really helpful. And that shared participation meant that we could start targeting things before it became an issue. And that was really valuable. So we did want to, as an officer group, extend our thanks to the ward councillors for that, because that was invaluable assistance. So following the successful deployment, in terms of our next steps, as alluded to, we're going to be performing further monitoring for the participation rates. We will carry on using the RAP guidance to assist us with that. The idea behind that is to understand where we can improve the participation, but because of the model that we're using, when we discover an area of low uptake, we can use a particular comms methodology to target that geographic area. And what that then also allows us to do is to analyse the most cost-effective, the best communication path. So we can really target the comms in the way that we know residents take up information that's most pertinent to them. So it will help us to improve the service, but also improve our communication. As we approach the first anniversary from the service starting, tonnage data then will account to 12 months. And what that will then allow us to do is to start looking at annual trending on the food waste, which at the moment, clearly we can't do. We're still in that first year. We're going to continue to work with our Hampshire partners in Project Integra. That's the name of the partnership that we're part of. We are actively sharing information with each other around our deployments, best practice, and trending that we are seeing. So, and that will include communication methodologies as well. So the idea then is that we can take learning from the wider geographic region, not just ourselves, so we can pick up all the good ideas. So that is literally a presentation just hitting the highlights of the report, which we hope will assist this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It certainly seems that this has been a team effort, and it's actually fantastic to see that the officers had the foresight to get the procurement in early, so we weren't held up. It's just a real good success story, and I must commend officers and ward councillors who have helped. It's a real team effort, and it's a really good thing to see. Did anyone have any questions? Councillor Mamamalene, and then Councillor Tustain, and then Councillor Hart, and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to bring some attention towards this report. The report categorically says it is complete, right? I have few objections on this. As of start of this month, there are so many houses in my ward. They haven't even received the caddy bins yet. Okay, that is my first observation. And it says it is completed. Secondly, and I asked for what is the ratio or the collection rate for each ward. And I was told that that data is not available because of the RAP system. But I have an objection here, would like to bring it to our attention. The report categorically says they have the data street by street. And what is stopping us to have the data by ward by ward? What is consist of streets? And the presentation missed, but of course the report says there are some streets where the collection rate is as low as 15%, which is far below the average of anything that we can see. So what is the plan to get up to the average to these figures? And why the delay happened to distribute these caddies to various places? Another important thing, during the deployment plan, there is a clear indication that community buildings, like the community centers, will be given the community food collection points or the community bins. But in my ward and my neighboring ward, I asked 2 community centers whether they received or not. They have not received. And then I did a small survey before this meeting. And I went to the various houses and I give a QR code, anonymous QR code, and asked them what is their problem to provide these bin collections where the bins are being provided. And this is the resident complaints they wrote to me. One of the residents says, the bin liners that are being provided, they have a small caddy. They need to carry the bin liner from the 9th floor or 8th floor from these flats. And before it reaches, they have to walk and the bin liner is tearing it off. So the bin liners which we provided, that 52 bin liners per head, per household, they are not quality enough. They are not holding the weight of the food waste. That is why they are tearing it off. So they can't use those ones. Instead, they are using normal plastic one, which is not helpful in this case. So that is another complaint that I received during these ones. And some people, they said they don't bother to report the missed bin collection because they have to go to the system and report it. And that is why they are not interested to do that way. So these are the few things that I identified during the bin collection. While I appreciate the effort of the government's initiative to have the food collection in place, we are doing this and there are so many teething problems there. And it is not fair to say that this is complete. The time schedule, it says that the deployment is completed, where the significant numbers, I'm not talking about 10 or 15, I'm talking about hundreds of properties in my ward. As of 1st of June, we are not deployed any food caddy bins.
We'll come back and I'll pass it over to the officers. So, Councillor, have you reported those significant misses of all those that haven't had bins?
Yes. Yes, Councillor, I did report it. Yeah.
Where did you report that to? Just so we can go back on that. So just be clear.
So should be aware of it. They got my email saying that Crown Heights didn't receive the bin collections as of 1st of June, and Skyline Plaza, they are still discussing it when to deploy it. That is as of June, 1st of June.
Just to clarify, it was Crown Heights and Skyline Plaza you're referring to. I also ask in relation, just to clarify again, and I want officers to come back on all the other points you raised, but I would assume that when you carry food out to the dispose of it, you would keep it in your caddy to carry it down the stairs to then put it into the bin. Is that not what happens?
Is it how the communication has gone?
Sorry?
Is it how the communication has gone? They need to carry the caddy as well along with the cover. Normally, I carry the cover and put it in the outside bin, from my kitchen bin to the outside bin. Where is the communication which specifically says you need to carry the small caddy until the food bin? There you need to move it from one place to the other place. That is not clear.
I would assume if it's leaking, it's common sense really that if it leaks anywhere, you would keep it in your caddy. Not everyone's leaks. is how that I do dispose of it. But if it does leak, I would assume it's common sense that that's what you do. But I'm going to pass over to the office now to pick.
Yeah, thank you. So if I can pick up on Crown Heights and Skyline Plaza, and I apologise if you've not received an email response back as yet, but the caddies were actually, we attempted to deploy them to those two sites. There are local agents, managing agents on site, and they actually refused to receive the caddies. So we have been negotiating with the managing agents since July of last year, and we are now deploying them. So I believe Skyline Plaza is or has gone out. And forgive me for not knowing the exact answer, but I'm actually on annual leave this week, but I will confirm it when I return to the office on Monday. But just for the reassurance of committee and anybody else, we attempted to deliver there, and they refused to accept the bins. So they are being deployed, and we have been in regular contact, and we actually followed that up with the directors of the managing agent to get formal acceptance of those bins on site. So they are being deployed. But just, I wanted to be clear that it wasn't a failure of deployment, it was an actual refusal of acceptance of those caddies.
Thanks. I'm just going to run through a few of the points, but if at any point you want to clarify your question, then go ahead, just stop me. In terms of sort of information by ward, we are often asked this. We've been asked it sort of for various collections over a number of years. The problem is our information does not reflect, our collections aren't by ward, and the information that we collate isn't by ward. So to then try and offer any comparison by ward is completely inaccurate and therefore doesn't really become viable. So our collection rounds are done geographically. This might mean a mixture of wards are collected, and yes, we have sort of property numbers per road. However, we have waste collected per round and per day. That's the total figure that we receive. Like I said, that is not reflective of ward boundaries at all. Now, if it is the participation monitoring that we're referring to by ward, to have something that is comparable ward by ward, you would have to have a large sample number of around 1,000 properties per ward, because 1,000 sort of collections of information is when a number becomes viable for comparison. So if we were to do that, we would need to carry out participation monitoring of around 1,000 per ward to then compare ward by ward. So although we do have participation monitoring information by road for the roads that we covered, we do not have a full sort of representative sample for every single ward. We as officers don't work by ward. We look at sort of the areas, we look at poor performing areas, we look at high performing areas, and we do have the data for the roads that we collected information on, but that isn't comparable by ward, and it's just not something we're able to offer because our collections aren't by ward either. Unfortunately, we also wouldn't have the resource within the team. We have 7 waste and recycling officers that carried out that participation monitoring over 3 weeks, but they're also the officers that do all of the queries, you know, and issues behind the scenes for residents. So we just can't take the time out of the office to do that level of participation monitoring. So yeah, I'm sorry that, you know, that's not available, but unfortunately that's just the way it is. There were some roads that were as low as I think 17%. Which is obviously not where we want the service to be. We want to have an excellent participation rate across all wards and all areas of the borough. And that's why we're looking at how we now communicate with those lower performing roads to see what communication methods will help them take up the service. It's not a compulsory service. So we don't really have a lot in our back pockets in terms of really making people use the service. All that we can do is encourage them and tell them about all of the benefits in terms of, you know, the money they can save if they can recognise where they're wasting food and the environmental sort of impacts and things like that. We just really have to plug why it's such a good thing to take part in. So sorry, I'm just going to tick off the bits that we're talking about. So in terms of community buildings, so as part of the Environment Act, there was different sort of stipulations for different types of buildings and businesses. Now, community buildings that would require a food waste service, we're not obliged to offer waste and recycling collections to those buildings. And so Helen's going to add in a bit more information there.
Yeah, so this is literally where a community building leases out its asset for a fee. That is then considered to be a commercial undertaking, and we do not provide commercial services. And because we are a statutory collection service for households, we're not allowed to then try and mix their waste in with our household collections. And that's why if a community centre does not lease out its property, let's say a scout hall, for example, that does nothing but support young people activity in the borough and makes no money from leasing out its property, we may offer them a food waste service. Where a community building offers out for lease its property, we do not collect their food waste. And that's why some community centres may be collected whilst others may not. And that's how we made the differential.
Thanks, Helen. The next point I just wanted to pick up is sort of gathering information from your communities. So if you are doing a survey or you're finding information out, it is our role as officers to find out as much information as we can so that we can be as helpful as we can. Obviously, as councillors, it is entirely up to you sort of what you choose to share with us, but we are so keen to hear any feedback about the service or why people aren't using the service. So if you do have any feedback from residents, please get in touch with us, because we're trying to gather that information all of the time. We're trying to understand why people might not be using the service. So the feedback regarding the liners is something that we heard from a few people. So then we looked at those and thought, well, okay, we need to offer advice on changing the liners frequently, letting people know that if the caddy isn't ventilated, then the breakdown of the liners can happen quite quickly and split. We did some sort of testing of those within the team and found that, if we left the lid closed and put things like hot tea bags in there, then the liners would become compromised really quickly. And so then we developed advice around that. I mean, we purchased the liners that were recommended to us in terms of sort of a national procurement framework. They're the largest supplier in the UK.
Can I also ask you to talk about, they don't have to comment, you don't have to put it.
No, they absolutely don't have to. Residents absolutely don't have to use compostable liners. We are really keen for people to sort of reuse any packaging within the home. It's a way of reusing packaging that might otherwise go in the waste bin, and secondly, it saves people from having to spend money on, let's face it, probably the least glamorous item that you're going to purchase for your household in the year. So we're really, really, really keen to understand all of the barriers to using the service, why people might need to know some information that we're not offering, and also, any reasons why they're not using the service that we can offer advice on or make a change on. I haven't got anything else left on my list, but if anyone else has got any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mama Lanene. If you'd like to respond quickly, and then we shall move on, because don't want to...
Chair, I'm deeply disappointed knowing that we have the data for streets, but we don't have the data for wards. Wards are made with streets. Am I missing any basic fundamental here? And that is a simple thing. And the communication wise, yes, they identified the faults about the bin liners, and this not been communicated. And another fundamental data that I observed just now, there are 150,000 total caddies, either inner or outer, has been distributed to total households, whereas this document says 250,000 we procured. So where this 100,000 has gone?
So the government provided capital funding for the deployment of the service, and as part of that process, because we had got in early on the procurement, we actually bought a stock of caddies so that new housing developments that came forward or people that came back to us to say, could they have another caddy? We've got a stock and a supply of those so that we could provide them free because the government had given us that upfront capital investment. So actually we have additional caddies. They're in our store and they're available. So that's why there's a disconnect between the number that we bought and the number that we put out. We have a supply back at base.
Say, in relation to there's continual, and maybe it might be useful at one of your meetings to hear from comms as to what they're putting out in relation to this whole area. And so to say that there's no comms gone out about the bags, there's a whole range of comms that go out on a regular basis in so many different forms. And as has just been said, a lot of it is around the bag and what not to use, or you can use bread bins, you can use your toilet paper bag that you have collect when your toilet rolls. You can use so many different forms, and you know, where you might have some frozen food in a bag that you might empty, that, you know, a big packet of chips, you might then want to use that bag. You can use any bag that you would like. You can use a carrier bag in the bin liner. All of that was communicated. Also, lots of reassurance around the bin, and that's continually done. And it's an ongoing piece of work, and it's just not going to stop. And obviously the comms are absolutely involved in how we increase the take-up of this service and are continually doing that and meeting with us and trying to drive up the usage of the food waste service.
Can I also just offer a little bit of clarification? Helen is completely right. We procured additional stock, but just to make, you know, very, very clear, the presentation that we just delivered speaks solely about Basingstoke and Dean containers and caddies. The report section is actually referencing our joint partnership with Hart. So those 250,000 caddies also include the 80,000+ that would have been purchased for Hart at the same time as those that were purchased for us. But yes, there is, like Helen said, an excess for delivery for people who wish to take up the service or need extra.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tustane.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in the issues around looking at waste reduction and also getting our percentage of recycling figures up to rise us from close to the bottom of the table to somewhere, and I'd be interested to know what the sort of the target is and if there's sort of plans in place to try to encourage that. The other side of it is those that aren't using the service. There's two things. Are there going to be, or has there been sort of spot checks to see if the food is in the grey bins, or whether there's a particular demographic that just don't waste as much food? I mean, I know there's only 2 in my house now, and I definitely don't fill the caddy in a week. So in actual fact, those low figures could signal a good behaviour in itself. So I just wondered how you're looking to work out the whys and the wherefores.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think that's a really valid point. There will be some people who don't use the service because they compost or they don't have food waste. So the way that the methodology that we're using, the RAP methodology, the reason it looks over 3 weeks is to see some people might only put their bin out once every 2 weeks. So it's not that they're not participating, they're just not participating as often. That was a bit of a mouthful. So I think that that's recognised. In terms of the future of participation analysis that we're doing, the reason that we're doing it the way that we are is to see which comms are more effective at increasing participation rates. So I don't think that at the moment we are not looking in the black bins for food waste itself, just because of time constraint on the rounds. But what we are doing is through that analysis, is because it's a representative sample of flatted developments, individual households, it's a consistent approach. It is helping us to build trending. It's quite difficult because that was the first one that we've done. But once we've done more of these, we will then start to pick up differences between geographic areas, types of housing, and we can then start targeting the groups that we're trying to reach. At the moment, it's just too early in the service to have that info.
And then I'll just pick up your point about waste reduction. So obviously recently we've had the waste strategy approved, and within that we are looking at actions to improve waste reduction. Obviously, like I said at the start of the presentation, what we actually want to see is our waste participation go up. Well, food waste participation go up, but actually our figures start to creep down, because we want people to stop wasting sort of the avoidable food waste, the over purchasing, the things slipping out of date, my bad cooking I don't think is ever going to stop. There will always be a certain amount of food that ends up in my bin due to that. But that's what the waste strategy looks at. It looks at how we help people to understand shopping lists, food planning, portion sizes, all of those things. We want to start getting more information out into schools to help children understand, how they decide how hungry they are. And, I ask my children before I stick the oven on, how hungry are you? How many fish fingers do you think you're going to manage tonight? It's just those conversations that maybe some people aren't having, and they're throwing away that avoidable food waste frequently. And that's where the benefit of the caddies comes in, because you can see it in one container. You can see the amount of food that you're wasting. So yeah, that's, in terms of waste reduction, that's the direction that we're heading.
Just going back to the figures for sort of targets and things, is there a sort of like a timeline, sort of whether, to try and get an idea of how quickly you want to get figures up and to a certain point?
So within the waste strategy, we've got our ambitions, our aims, our targets. Obviously, there's the government targets, which are to increase our recycling rate to 65%. We've got some interim targets that look at our food waste participation reaching 75%, because whilst that's not a compulsory target, that's really important for us. We want more people to participate in the services that we offer. So that's sort of one of our ambitions. And then we've got sort of ambitions to deliver certain amounts of waste reduction information and things like that through the action plan. So our interim target for recycling is 40% by 2028. That's not very far away. But it's, the changes that we've made are really positive, and yeah, we're looking to be on track. So yeah.
Councillor Hart.
Thank you, Chair. I had just a couple of brief points. I think that overall this was a really clear and very positive read. I think that the piece of work as a whole, nothing's ever 100%, perfect. This is people we're talking about, but altogether, when you consider the scale of this and the scale of the behavioural change, I think you've all done a banging job, and congratulations to all of you. But a couple of things, this is a finicky point, but there were a couple of acronyms that I had to look up that weren't included in the glossary. I figured out what RAP was myself. I still don't know what BAU it stands for. Sorry? Oh, it's business speak. That's why I don't know it. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the trends, identifying trends that might indicate why some areas have lower participation rates, I was going to raise a similar point, but I don't want to belabour it. So I wondered whether instead I could offer the suggestion that if you have a small list of certain streets that are your lowest participators, if that is, the lowest 10% or whatever of streets in the borough that can be made available to ward members, then when we're out on our rounds and door knocking, we can check in with people and ask why they're not. Is it because they're composting? Is it because they're too busy? Is it blah, blah, blah? And we can feed that back to you. if that's data that we're permitted to have. I'd be happy to do that. And just not for now, because this is probably not something that you'll have with the limited 6 months of data, but as someone that doesn't speak tongues, for future stuff, it would be nice if you could provide like an equivalent in elephants or Audis or something for our understanding. And it would be good to know in the longer term, I know this is not really, it's probably a drop in the ocean at the moment, but in terms of the fertiliser that's produced, it would be good to know how much that is. I know you won't be able to do an exact calculation because it won't be going everywhere, but in terms of fertiliser that's used, how much of it are we now providing? I think that would be a really positive figure to be able to communicate to people, and how much we're helping local farms with that in the longer term. But thank you again, this is good stuff.
And Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of my questions have already been answered, but I, for one, compost. I haven't touched my food recycling because I bought a Joanna a long time ago, and it's absolutely marvellous. And yeah, you mentioned these plastics. You don't need to use the issued bags. Are all plastic bags acceptable when you're putting this into an anaerobic digester? Because some of them you have to throw away into the waste bin. Interesting question.
Yeah, so the processor itself removes all bags. So if you have a compostable bag that hasn't fully broken down yet, it's removed, and it removes all the plastic as well. So that's why we were saying to residents, you can literally, if it's a plastic bag and it's a single-use plastic, rather than having a single-use plastic, by all means, put it in your liner, put it in to line the caddy and use that bag.
Thank you.
Councillor Rand.
Just a couple of points. So, with regard to improving the waste recycling, how does it affect commercial businesses, and do you have any influence over the commercial waste companies as to how they manage food waste?
No, not at all. No, we don't. The commercial sector is entirely separate from ourselves. But I would imagine it will follow the national guidance. There's a waste hierarchy. The way that the private sector has been involved is in the legislation itself. So what the government is trying to achieve is a circular economy in waste. They're running a number of initiatives as a result of the changes to legislation. And the whole point of those changes is that it makes economic disadvantage to producers to manufacture things that are non-recyclable. So it drives food waste, it drives recycling in general, it minimises or will minimise the use of single-use plastics in favour of, say, for example, glass. So that's the way that the government is driving that agenda.
Thank you. Is there an opportunity, therefore, to work with restaurants that have high levels of food waste to get them to compost and provide compost equipment for them rather than put it in their general waste?
So the act that Helen mentioned in terms of picking up on commercial waste, they are mandated to the same collections that we are. So any business that creates waste as food waste as its business, so cafes, restaurants, that kind of thing, have to have a food waste collection. That's compulsory. And then any business with more than 10 full-time employees must also have a food waste collection. So if you have a small business, a small office, and you've got 9 employees, you're exempt from having a food waste collection from the office. If you have 10 or more full-time employees, you then have to, through your sort of commercial waste provider, also have to request a food waste service. So yeah, the only people exempt are ones with a small number of employees.
Thank you. And can I just suggest, in terms of communicating around the food caddy and what you can use, I think everybody has a binfluencer on their local Facebook page. As councillors, we could engage with them to try and put our message out there. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. The feedback that we had from ward councillors was genuinely invaluable in this process. It really helped us to understand different perspectives, different views, the different types of customers that we have, and maybe their lifestyles or how that impacted. So I thought the idea that you brought forward about us sharing those areas of low take up would be really, really helpful. We would genuinely appreciate the assistance in that way.
Is there anybody else that would like to comment? Councillor Slimming?
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, can I just say I enjoyed reading the report and I thought how marvellous you all were, and especially the fact that communications have received some commendations for the work that you did, that you adopted, which we had input into when we originally started talking about it. We had some fantastic presentations from our comms team, and we gave them some ideas which they took all on board, and I thought that was really positive. And I think for most things, when you're trying to communicate with so many people in so many different ways, I mean, it's marvellous that people do actually do things very quickly, and I'm very pleased with the results. Certainly the report is quite comprehensive. It already covered the issues of some of the middle of the town issues, which I'm afraid the council didn't seem to pick up from the report, and other things, so that was very useful. On a personal front, I wonder, again, talking about the roads that aren't taking things up, where I live, there are quite a lot of houses with long gardens, and we all use a lot of our potato peelings, etc., and we compost because we've got the access to a garden and we use it. And many of my neighbours have said they don't actually use it at all because they actually don't overbuy stuff. They're pensioners, so they're a bit careful. They don't waste food, they eat it, recycle it. Personally, I put it into something else the next day, and obviously use the compost waste in their garden. So I think it might be interesting to see what types of properties maybe being a bit resistant to this. And also, I think the other issue that I would raise is that it's very difficult for me. I would really like to recycle an awful lot of things that I have in my house. So if I buy something from, a takeaway type dish, I have to put that in the waste bin and not in the recycling bin. And that obviously the fact that people are not always sure what they should do with their items sometimes confuses my neighbours. They had a party and they had a huge amount of waste and said, can we put it in your recycling bin? I said, yes. So when I opened it and found things that shouldn't be in there, I had to resort it and put the things in the right bin. But it is quite confusing because we're not yet got there with our plastic recycling, single-use plastic recycling. But I certainly would like to commend you. I think you've done a fantastic job. I used to work with RAP when I worked at the Environment Agency, and I know if they've given you a clean bill of health, that's obviously good news as well. So shall we celebrate the fact that this council has done a really good job, has put out marvellous communications and have learnt, the lessons learnt is obviously going to be useful when we move to the next stage, which will be another communication issue, which we'll have to talk about when we move to fortnightly collections, because obviously that's going to be a big change for people, and I know a lot of people are quite worried about that, and we'll go into that when it comes out. But quite honestly, I think we should be saying thank you to you all, which I hope other people would agree, rather than actually raising issues that perhaps we should have raised before. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Slimming. I think unless anybody has any other comments they wish to make, I think that will be the end of this item. Certainly our recommendation that the committee notes the contents of the report and the progress made to date, and also our congratulations to the officer for a very good job. Well done. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair.
Can I also thank Helen for coming in on her annual leave as well, so thank you.
Absolutely, above and beyond that one. Okay, thank you very much. So now we move on to our review of the work programme. So the July meeting will be cancelled because we don't have any agenda items ready to go. So the process, are we all familiar with the process to submit items through the topic suggestion form, or do we need to run through that again? Councillor Slimming.
Oh, thank you, Chair. In the past, we used to have meetings as chairs and vice chairs to actually decide what our programme was for the coming year, which I don't know whether that happened last year because the vice chairman didn't get elected to this committee for quite some time, so I was vice chair last year. And I think that's useful because when you look at the number of strategies that might be coming up this year for review, I would have thought that there is quite a lot of things that are going to come up during this year that could be slotted into our programme quite readily, but also depending on what the Cabinet are going to be discussing as well, because I think there needs to be a joined up process, as well as members asking for questions, obviously. But hopefully some of the newer members in the induction have been advised how they actually get things on the agenda if they need it. But I think one of the first things probably you need to do is have a look at what policies are coming forward for review anyway, and make sure that ties in with the time frames that might be Cabinet.
Thank you. We do have obviously pre-chairs, pre-meetings scheduled, and now you are the vice chair. I will make sure you are included in those meetings. Councillor Rand and then Councillor Miller, please.
If you could just summarise quickly, because I'm not sure at this stage I would know how to. Sorry, thank you. I wouldn't know how to submit an item for the agenda.
Hi, yeah, so with overview and scrutiny committees, so although there are some items that naturally come to the committee through officers where that might be like a policy change or something they want committee feedback on, a lot of overview and scrutiny is topics that are suggested by members. So the way to do that is through a topic suggestion form, and I can recirculate the link to the committee. And then once you fill that out, that then goes to the next committee for discussion, and then it gets scheduled onto the agenda. Yeah.
Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Chair. I couldn't agree more with what Councillor Slimming just said. May I suggest, having been the chair of various committees over the years, you have to prod the Cabinet a bit, because it's been noticed over the last couple of years that some of the subjects that come to or don't come to the committees, we seem to have had some thin agendas. But I think I'm going to raise one topics. If you look under the topics that this committee is due to cover, there's something like 33 of them. Topic number 9 is pest control. And the items under topic number 9 are rats. Now, I don't know about any other councillor in this room. They give advice to householders if they have rats on their property. But we do have an obligation to look at the rats in the public domain. Now, in the last 6 months, I've had so many reports, certainly in Chinham, we knew there was a lot of rats in the public domain, but recently they're starting to invade houses. Now, okay, where's the boundary? A rat doesn't look at a boundary. They are all over the place, and the weather is not lending itself to getting rats slowing down and breeding. There's more of them than there is of us. That's a fact in this world. But they're becoming very prominent. And I've had them reports, certainly in one of the playgrounds in Chinham, that these rats are just running riot over the playgrounds that were designed to be used by young children. I think it's probably affecting all wards, but I've never seen it come before one of these committees. And I'll probably put a suggestion in for the committee to address this and get officers to have a look at it, because pest control, you have to pay for your own, but if your rats are coming in from the public domain, I think we are obliged to take action as well. but I think it's because of the climate, especially. It's going to be quite a challenge and a health risk.
I totally agree with you. I mean, where my youth project is, it's right by Hants FA, and the youth project I run is right by Hants FA and not far from the leisure park. And we get a lot of rats because it's the leisure park and people are disgusting and they don't put their waste in the bin. I totally agree with you. I think this would be a very valid item to come to the work programme. I do think we need to work on this, whether it's encouraging people to put their waste in the bin rather than just drop it where it is, to other ways we control the rats. I think, yes, I absolutely appreciate that suggestion. Thank you, Councillor Miller. We will put that on the work programme. Councillor Tustain?
Thank you, Chair. Last year I got this put on here at the back because it does it's a good, like an aid memoir, really, to show exactly what we're covering. And also you can see in one of the columns it shows where there aren't policies. So that would be a good point to consider whether or not we do need policy. And I think it's also important, especially for those that are new, the point of scrutiny is for us to be looking at making sure we are delivering good value to residents. So looking at that and looking at figures and considering what we can scrutinise from that is a very good idea. So there's quite a lot in there. And I think even though we might not have time for the July one, I would like to see us reschedule an extra date further on, like I did last year, to make sure we don't lose out on the number of meetings, because there is a lot of things we could be looking at.
That is a perfectly valid suggestion, and I will certainly agree with that. Thank you very much. If we can schedule that extra date, that would be grand. Thanks, Ellie. Councillor Hart, and then Councillor Rand, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of brief things. I don't think it is part of the new incoming councillor training. It's one of the things that I've raised with the relevant officers is, and I do understand that there are 1,000,001 other different bits of training that we have to do when we get newly elected, but how this works in terms of committees, scrutiny, how to raise those forms, etc., isn't something that we do. So I think this is a valuable discussion, and it's something that new members among us should feel free, I think, to ask those of us who have been around a little bit longer, how that happens. As well as the officers, who I'm sure will be happy to help. On the rats thing, that is something that has I've had a lot of back and forth with a lot of residents about in Hatch Warren and Beggarwood, and I had a meeting with an officer, I'm gonna say back of last year, can't remember exactly, maybe November, to talk about the idea of some plants. I did a fair bit of digging around into this, and I'm not a plant person. I kill things when I look at them, but my understanding is that some plants are natural pest deterrents. So I wondered about the idea of a trial area where we might, instead of planting the sorts of bog standard things we would usually do, we would trial in the more residential areas and the paths and the runs that become the natural rat runs, if you like, whether we can trial the idea of using natural pest deterrent stuff as we replant new areas, and see if that has any impact and is a little bit more ecologically friendly than some of the nastier ways of the sort of reactionary way that we send pest management people out. And I would be happy to share that work with you if you were to put in a work programme request rather than repeating it and doing the same thing at the same time. That was it.
I would be very interested to discuss that. I've always been worried with things like pest control with rats. If you lay poison down, it leads to poisoning other animals and things like birds of prey. So anything that's more environmentally friendly, I would certainly like to hear around that. Councillor Rand?
Thank you, Chair. Just like to thank Councillor Tustain for this piece of work on the list. That's very helpful for somebody new like me. And Councillor Hart, yeah, I'll take up that offer if I need anything. Thanks very much. You may regret that. I just wanted to say regarding rats and the Chair's point around people's behaviour and littering, whilst rats may be a consequence of that, as a dog owner, the problem that I have is he will eat anything, and some of the food that he finds in places. So can we bring that back to more of an education piece, as we've talked before, in terms of you know, what the consequences are. But also one of the areas that I've noticed in terms of rats is litter bins in unadopted areas, and how we manage that with the developers who've obviously by at this stage moved on, and how that is coped with. Because again, that's something I'd be interested to know.
I was just going to say as well, we are in the process of arranging some overview and scrutiny training as well, so that will be on its way as well.
Okay, was there anybody else? Councillor Miller?
This is a question to officers, I think, and I think Councillor James might be able to answer it. When is the next rollout of the change of the waste collection? Because it was brought up earlier that there is going to be a change coming up. Do we have a committee before that happens?
So there was an all-member briefing a couple of weeks ago in discussing this. Did you attend? I don't really remember.
Probably
not. Yeah. So we will be updating members in. I will clarify when we're updating members and when the next all-member briefing is, and the next all-member in-person briefing is in September, and this gets rolled out. Well, there's lots of stages. There's lots of things that are going to be rolled out along the way, but that was all discussed in the all-member briefing that we had just recently. Yes, I think we've got it in writing, and the presentation has been presented to everybody. It's am I right? I mean, yeah. So you've got that presentation, and it also told you that in July, I think it is, you will be getting a update in the form of an email update newsletter, and then we'll have another before we roll out, as Councillor Slimming said, because lots of points were raised at that member briefing, and so it's just about making sure it's successful and what we do. We've obviously gone through cabinet, and we've had the waste strategy, and one of the things that we will be rolling out, and which we said about, is mixed plastics will be being able to be collected from bring banks, and I think the timescale for that is August. So prior to any changes to the bin service, you will be able to take mixed plastics, which is pots, tubs and trays, and they're called cartons, not Tetra Packs, because that's a brand name, to these bring bank sites, with the aim of us introducing one in every ward going forward, while we wait for county to catch up for 2028. These will be temporary measures. So all of that was presented at that. If you have any concerns and you want to, in the interim, talk to the officers, I'm sure we can arrange a meeting for you to catch up. If you look at the presentation, if you then have further concerns, I'm more than happy to. But you will be updated again in, like I say, I think it's July. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
These slides went out on from Sandra Hillman on the 2nd of June.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Thank you. Yes, I was very aware of that presentation. My concern is the public. How we broadcast that to the public. Since the calendar was withdrawn from the Basingstoke website, you could put in and you could see your calendar of collection dates. This is going to be even more complex, certainly with change. Change is a very difficult thing to get across to 185,000 people in the borough. Now, I've asked Councillor Tomlin about this, about why that calendar was withdrawn. They said he wasn't sure. No, it never did find out why. I found it. I used to print it and have it next to my recycling corner in the house, but the calendars aren't there anymore. And I think it's even more important that those are made available to the public, so everybody knows on your postcode, at your address, exactly what gets collected when. but we don't have it anymore. You have to go on and log it into the website individually for your own house to find out, and you have to go back again and then again. You can't print it out.
I'm pleased to say that in relation to, and you would have been given this information as well, but as you didn't attend, and that what we will be getting is all members, all residents shortly will be given a leaflet that will explain more about what you can, remind people what you can and what you can't do, what you will be able to do, and the timelines and everything. It's a very comprehensive piece of literature that will go to every household, and on the back of it will be a calendar, and that calendar is of the size that you will be able to keep, and it will show you, I think it is planned for the next I think it's 8 months, I can't be absolutely sure, but you will have that, and it will tell you when you will be putting what service out, and it also tells you additional things of where you can recycle other things. It talks about other services we have in relation to bulky waste and the green waste and all of the other things, but also if you want to take a piece of furniture, or if you want to take a pushchair, or if you want to, and it gives you all of that information. So that will be going to everyone. I suggest if you read the presentation, and when we receive the email in August, if you have any concerns following that, but there is communication going on. The Gazette are working with us and have already started this big campaign and telling people about what's going on. Our comms is working on this on a regular basis, and so there will be enormous amount of work going on with residents now to prepare them for those changes and to support them in that process.
Councillor Conquest, apologies.
Can I ask Councillor James, in that communication, will it include information about local repair cafes? Because especially as we introduce small electrical recycling as well, I think that's really important that people are made aware of repair cafes as an alternative.
Because of the size of the document, I don't know, but I think it makes reference to it, and it tells you then where to look for stuff. But as part of the work that we're going to be doing in relation to repair cafes, and as part of the waste strategy, there's a big piece of work going to go on that. And so we will be, but I can't be absolutely 100% sure that it's on that leaflet, because there's obviously so much that we've got to put on, and we've got to be careful that we don't, it's readable as well. But it is very much part of the waste strategy in repair cafes, and it's also about how we expand that service. And I think Helen Taylor-Cobb is wanting to talk to yourself and to Johnny and how we work with you on that. And I know that she will be contacting you to talk about that as part of this process.
Okay, has anyone any other comments on the work programme that we have here? I mean, obviously, if something immediate crops up that you'd like added to the work programme that isn't on this list, then give me an email and we'll see if we can work it in there somewhere, because I'm sure that sitting here right now, it's quite difficult to think what can we put in the work programme. But you might get a resident come to you next week, next month, and you think, actually, that needs to go in there. So yeah, if you've got any suggestions at any time, just send them in. And so are we all happy with the work programme that we have got so far, as long as we include an extra meeting to... Okay, excellent. So I think that is everything. So thank you very much for coming. Have a lovely weekend when it gets here. Mind you, I'll probably see all of you tomorrow at Full Council. I will see you tomorrow. Take care. Safe journeys home.